Good evening. I want to talk to you tonight from my heart on a subject of deep concern to every American. In recent months, members of my administration and officials of the Committee for the Re-election of the President, including some of my closest friends and most trusted aides, have been charged with involvement in what has come to be known as the Watergate affair.
It was 42 years ago this day when a band of bumbling burglars stumbled their way into history, being caught trying to ransack the Democratic National Committee headquarters in an office/hotel called Watergate. It was really very little of value for them to steal, but the botched robbery started a chain of events that resonates to today in American politics. Joining us at Midpoint, Professor Emeritus at the University of Madison, Wisconsin, author of the book Abuse of Power, The New Nixon Tapes. Welcome in, Stanley Kutler. Mr. Kutler, thanks so much for joining us.
You're welcome.
Let us look forward then, because that's what this is all about. Here we are years later, and you were so involved in this. What are the echoes of this break-in that still resonate today in American government and the way that people look at their government?
Well, it resonates in a variety of ways. Today, scandal is the watchword of our political lives. Everybody's looking for a scandal. And, of course, we have this great suffix called gate that is attached to everything in American life, whether it's Debategate, whether it's Bridgegate, and so forth. You know, all that seems to trivialize Watergate, though. You treat Watergate as any kind of commonplace, third-rate burglary, as Nixon's press secretary called it. Well, Watergate is a seminal event in our history. It precipitated what I would say was the greatest constitutional crisis since the Civil War. And it's important, and it doesn't deserve to be trivialized in that kind of way. Of course, Nixon himself is with us in a variety of ways. I argue, at the risk of some heresy, that Richard Nixon is the most important political figure of the past 60 years in American public life. Many things that he did are still with us, for good and for ill. I mean, Watergate, for example, is still with us, obviously. But so much else of what he did is still with us, again, for good and for ill. And he's important. Of course, at the end, he cannot, as Lincoln said, escape history. And we do come back to Watergate in one fashion or another. It is, quoting Shakespeare, his spot that will not out.
With about a minute left here right now, is it fair to say that there are some politicians, they look back 40 years ago and they still haven't learned the lessons of Watergate, those simple lessons about cheating?
Well, Watergate was also about money. You know, people forget that when the Senate committee investigated, it was called the Senate Select Committee on Campaign Financing. So here we are 40-some years ago, where campaign financing was a major event in American life that caused a very traumatic event. And yet, I would argue we've learned nothing from that.
It would certainly seem so, at least when we look at Washington today. With about 20 seconds left, what is the one thing that you take from Watergate, the one thing that you really remember, personally?
On a personal level?
On a personal level.
I love the Senate hearings. To me, that was the last, that was a model congressional investigation. It was fair. It was limited to a few senators. If you remember Iran-Contra, they had about 35 senators and representatives in there, all fighting for the microphone. The Senate Select Committee was essentially a show with two senators and the committee counsel. The others were just stage props.
There you go. There you go. People still haven't learned anything. Politicians just don't learn very often, do they? Mr. Kutler, thank you so much for joining us today again, and let's hope some people learn.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Question for you then. Where were you on the day that the break-in happened at Watergate? And what is it that you remember personally, and have politicians ever really learned anything after all those years at Watergate? Get a hold of us on social media, because that's your contact with us. Twitter, email, and Facebook. Because here on the Newsmax Network and on Midpoint, every day we question everything.